What a term, psychometrician. First time I ever heard that term, psychometrician, I'm like, is that like some sort of mathematics person who went insane? And the answer is usually yes.
How can a set of skills lead you down the path to success? That's what we're setting out to answer on the EdUp Canada podcast. I'm your host, Michael Sangster. Join me as we unpack how leaders around the world have taken training and skills and turned that into a lasting career. Now let's learn together. Welcome back to the EdUp Canada podcast. I am Michael Sangster, your host, and I'm excited today to be joined by James Stanger, the Chief Technology Evangelist for CompTIA, a world-renowned technology group that we're working with in partnership and getting to know the team there closely. And James is one of those great guys, and he was willing to come on here and defend the U.S. hockey team after a very difficult loss to Team Canada last week. We felt it was important to have an American here, and actually where he lives, I think that may have been one of the states that has now joined Canada because of a lost bet during the hockey game, right?
I think so. I think that was part of the bet. That, and I think we're having to trade the Hanson brothers to Canada, if you know what I mean.
Can we get the Hanson brothers?
Well, that's what I heard.
Funny story. I go curling every year in Utica, New York, and that movie was filmed in the Utica Memorial Arena.
It was, yeah.
And we went to a game one night. The Belleville Senators, the Ottawa team, were playing Utica. We had a night off, so we went and watched the game. And we're like looking at the arena. We're like, this looks really familiar. And it was the arena they played that they filmed a lot of Slapshot in.
I love it. That's such a wild movie. Yeah.
So we came back the next year and we wore the jerseys with the Hanson on the back and the Syracuse Chiefs. We wore the Syracuse Chiefs, I think it was, jerseys, and all the Utica guys loved us for doing it because they knew the reference. So we're a little reverent on this chat. We like to get people going, but I asked James to join us today because I've never met an evangelist for technology before. I've met a lot of guys who talk, but no one who actually got it right in their title. So what does that mean?
I think a lot of this started in the software world. They will have a developer advocates or an evangelist. So if there's a platform or a language, whether it be Python or a specific platform, they'll have evangelists. And we thought it was time to have an evangelist at CompTIA who kind of acted as a liaison, not only for tech, but the liaison between the hiring person, whether it be a CIO, hiring manager, and education. So my job is to basically, for example, if you were to take Security Plus or A Plus, any of the courses that we have, it's a lot of fun. I'll get on a video with somebody and have a conversation with them, or I'll do a demonstration of a technology. So if there's somebody who is really good at encryption, we bring them on and we have an interview with them. So the idea of bringing this tech alive. And I also I travel the world. In fact, the last 3 weeks I've been in, I was at the Ministry of Defense in Japan for the ground forces. And then I was in the UK talking to believe it or not, to the seven lords of leaping, to the lords and the MPs of the UK, Ministers of Parliament. Is that the term?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, the Ministers of Parliament. Yep.
And then the next week I was at the Pentagon. So I do a lot of work, not just with government though, but with corporations, talking to them about their problems. And then as part of my research function, not only do I talk about the tech, but I will go back and talk to our products folks and say, here are some ideas that I've been seeing and hearing. And that complements the amazing research that we do that is much more, how should I put this? I'm kind of the one person who does a bit of a sanity test. And then there's the heavy duty research that we do where we get input from thousands of subject matter experts. So research does the quantitative and I'll kind of do a lot of the qualitative, if you don't know.
I used to be in the high tech sector early in my career and the developers called me, we can do that. That was my title. They would always remind me that we actually couldn't do it after I'd sold it. But then they would come back and, 9 times out of 10, they'd actually find a way to do it and we'd make a better product. My problem was I had too much common sense and that would get in the way. But let's dive in there because you just touched on a couple of things of exactly why we're working with you. We'll get to labor force later, but you guys bring together the best of the best to build things, don't you? I've been in that room in Chicago where they get together and build curriculum and build programs.
So you did that where they lock the door with a chain, they won't let you out, and they bring food in, but that's about it, right? Yeah.
But they're not CompTIA people, are they?
No. they're not. We don't have just CompTIA people who act as mad scientists and come up with stuff. You're right. We get subject matter experts from around the world. And in fact, we really defined that process. You can say, well, no, James, people have been using subject matter experts to define their products for decades, but we started back in the 90s. And it was something that people have been using psychometricians and doing analytics on things.
Let me get that one down for later.
What a term, psychometrician. First time I ever heard that term, psychometrician, I'm like, is that like some sort of mathematics person who went insane? And the answer is usually yes.
Yes.
No,
but there was a skill that came out of it.
Yeah. And we didn't define psychometrics. That's been around a lot longer, but it's the whole idea of if you create an exam, is that exam fair? And how do you determine if it's fair? And you can really apply a lot of statistics. You could argue that a psychometrician is somebody who basically applies metrics, right? There's the metrician part to the learning, to the, not the psychology of learning, but to what's going on in the exam. So that instead of an exam that tests how well you take an exam, it's an exam that actually determines, do you really, as a professional, in giving your answer, are you showing competency over professional or under professional ability? So it's not just knowledge. It's basically, the psychometrician is just somebody who's able to look at the statistics and say, that question is not performing right. There must be something wrong with it.
So we started working with you guys for one simple reason. Well, two, Gary Mofford from your team in Canada wouldn't let go. Relentless guy.
That's Gary.
Become a good friend, not a great golfer, but a great guy. That's just in case he listens, because now he'll call me. But one of the reasons we started working with you is we just did a job search. We go out and we look. So the National Association has 580 members. We provide curriculum to them in some cases, but they also build their own curriculum. They do their own thing. So we're looking, where should we be spending some time and effort in our next curriculum? And immediately cyber, IT, those kinds of fields came up that huge demand. I came from 15 years in the telecom sector in Canada. I understand that demand, and it's at all levels, from somebody getting 20 hours of training to someone getting a couple of thousand hours. It really is all levels. So we started searching around, and what do we find? Every job posting had CompTIA or one of your programs as a requirement. Isn't it true?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. There is an inordinate amount of job postings out there that will say CompTIA required, CompTIA preferred. It's interesting you use the term all levels. That's a cool phrase, because I would argue that like the Grateful Dead, no one does quite what we do. The reason I say that is because we do cybersecurity. We do it really well. But we also have things, not so much in telecommunications, but in cloud, in help desk, in networking, which is close to telecommunications, from data center to cloud to cybersecurity to data. So in other words, we kind of get out there and try to address what I call all four areas of what I would call of IT, all four pillars. So infrastructure, things like networking, tech support, things like that, cybersecurity, data, and development. So the four areas we really want to focus on, those four areas, because to us, we help the whole stack, the whole technology stack.
And demand is only growing, and AI is causing more challenges and more issues, and the demand is only going through the roof of what needs to be done by real people, right?
It is. It's funny that you say that, because there's so much of what I would call the pablum, meaning kind of just silly, superficial talk is, well, AI is replacing everything. It's like, well, it's certainly disrupting, but it's making people understand their foundations.
I try and avoid using the word disruption when speaking to any American these days, because there's a lot of disruption going on in your country.
Yeah, there is. Yeah.
And we're looking forward to having our big event with our partner CQ, Career Education College, University in Las Vegas. But I got to tell you, tariffs don't make it easy as we sit around the table and we look at things. But that's the beauty of when you're in a partnership, you just keep going. You just keep pounding on through. And the stuff that we've started to do with you guys, I've been in your TV studios in Chicago. They're incredible.
Those are great, aren't they?
And even your people. Your CEO came up and spoke at our conference in November in Toronto. It's rare when I'm the smartest person in the room, but I was not even close to that guy when he got up on stage. He's bright.
Yeah, it's fantastic to see the conversance that he brings, and like you said, the level of intelligence and the engagement that he brings.
He was able to bring it down to the level of everybody in the room could understand it, from a healthcare instructor to a CEO of a college, could really get a feel for what he was talking about and what CompTIA is doing. So talk to me a little bit. You talk about research. You guys got a big team of people doing research. You got a lot of product development stuff. I got to walk through last week, some interesting stuff coming. But talk to me a little bit about job need, job demand as you see it in your job around the world for these kinds of roles.
Around the world, there are a couple of things that seem to be, big trends that are going, and they've been continuing trends. So the first one is, we can start with cybersecurity. In the cybersecurity world, we still need people who are security operations center analysts. There's a real need for people who can basically do the defense side of things. You call that blue team, call that what you want, but it's people who can, whether they're using AI or whether they're looking at log files or a tool such as Splunk or what have you. We need people who can kind of look at the hacker lifecycle from the defense perspective.
What's the greatest piece of advice you've got for somebody just to protect themselves?
Protect themselves, I would say become literate at what you're using. There's a big difference between being able to use some device, whether it be your mobile phone or a gaming console or IoT device, and then understanding what's going on underneath the hood. I think as internet users, we become more consumers than actual smart consumers.
Harder and harder every day, though, to be literate in all the things that we're using, isn't it?
Yeah, but all of our things do have common elements. They all have IP addresses, MAC addresses, software, firmware that needs to be updated or controlled. So there are some good common sense things that do apply across devices. And I think it's that understanding of what layer you can apply to a technology as diverse as this stuff is getting. You can still apply it in I won't use the word common sense way because none of that is commonsensical, but in a methodological way.
I'm removed from tech a bit now, but I do little things now. I like enable all cookies. Some of these basic things now that I think the average person looks at that, your stuff and goes, what do I do here? I'm rejecting all now.
Well, because the reason, why would you enable cookies? There could be times when you want to do it. Sometimes as I do research, sometimes as I work with a platform that I know, then I will enable more cookies than before. But if I'm just kind of surfing stuff and doing whatever, there's no need to have them track me or save information. I'm not so much a tinfoil hat type person. I'm not accusing you either of being one, but I do like the idea of just being discreet.
Yeah, I'm not, but I think it's important for people who have a little bit of judgment to actually have the conversation about the things you should and shouldn't do. And that what we're doing with you is way beyond this stuff, but you do some of this kind of basic learning for people too, don't you, at CompTIA, to help people understand. One of the great things about our partnership is that you're incredibly committed to NAC and our members and making sure we're supportive, because your ethos at CompTIA is really about getting this stuff out there, isn't it?
Very much so. It's good. I like that term ethos because that's very much what we're looking to do as part of our ethos or our approach to things. We feel that it is time to make a move, and it's time for us to basically really move the needle in some areas. That's why we want to get deeper and broader topics. And you mentioned something earlier about that we do teach things that are about on the essential side of things. So in addition to our advanced type things that we'll do, from Security Plus on up to what is Security X, for example, or Cloud Network X. We also have Tech Plus. And so a Tech Plus is something that's designed to get people to kind of raise their horizon of expectations. And that's a fancy phrase for saying, I didn't know what I didn't know, and so now I have a better horizon of, okay, I get an idea of what might be out there. Whereas before you didn't know. And it kind of goes back to those 4 pillars of IT. If you take Tech Plus, it gives you that foundation of things to understand, what really is, what cookies do, what really happens with IoT devices and the data they capture, more than just fear, uncertainty, and doubt, but just like saying, well, I kind of have an idea where that stuff goes.
My greatest fear these days, just having a little bit of reverent fun here, is I click something before I look. That seems to be the way so many things pop up at you now. I make sure I've had a cup of coffee before I go in my emails this morning, because there's at least 7 or 8 phishing things every morning that still are getting through despite our enhanced stuff. No, I know that I didn't give myself a raise as CEO of the organization. I'm not going to open that spreadsheet. I got an email last week from me to me telling me about the raise I gave myself.
Could you forward that to me? Because I'd love to get a raise.
It'd be kind of fun to be able to just walk in the morning and go, you know what, 10% more. Click. I think that's called entrepreneurship. When you work hard and you get to go out and build your own, then you can do it.
The phishing is getting more convincing all the time, to me anyway.
Oh yeah. I had one with my own signature on it.
That's impressive.
In the bottom base of the email had my own signature on it, which is interesting because mine is a chicken scratch. It's not a great signature, and it was there. Before we get back to the topic at hand, I just want to remind our listeners today that Canada did beat the U.S. last week in hockey. For any of you who aren't quite sure or didn't catch the start of the episode, and we're still negotiating. I think we got Michigan and Minnesota too, but I think Minnesota just wanted to join Canada. It wasn't really related to the hockey game. So we're looking forward to spending some time with you guys this year on some different platforms. We got a curriculum that's coming out soon with you that we have built for a cybersecurity analyst.
That's cool stuff.
Which is going to be really cool. We believe in standardization programs whenever we can get them, and our colleges are willing to work together to build those because employers look to that. They look to our brand on the healthcare side. So now I'm hoping with us and you on the IT side and the cyber side, I think we're going to get somewhere. And I've actually had a fairly large corporation reach out to me to talk about this and see what's this thing look like, because they'd like to put some people through it. And knowing there's a standardized program, and I have to say the other part we love about what you guys do. For an employee who goes and gets that skill set, they're now transferable too. It gives them something they can take somewhere because it's CompTIA.
It's so much fun to the partnership they have in mind. They see the reach that you have, right? And the fact that you are able to liaise between the learner, right, and the employer, that's just so important. And so we bring in, like you said, the standardized curriculum, the standardized approach, so that you're really teaching what needs to be taught. You're not wasting anyone's time. You're not wasting the employer's time, not wasting the student's time. It's all about getting into that tech,
And what do we know about upgrading a program compared to you guys with the team that you've got, internal and external, right? Your work would be way better than anything that we could do with a few experts doing it compared to CompTIA with their thousands of people building a program.
That's right. And this is so neat is that, what does CompTIA know about creating an education program, right, that interfaces with industry there at that level, right? See, that way we're sharing each other's strengths. And that's
funny. It's funny you say that because we worked with your team to build this program that we're launching, and we're just waiting for the final government approvals on the program. But we've had to move your stuff around a little bit to meet our students, which are some nights, weekends, single moms, building programs that allow you to come in. And we're not laddering the programs. They're all together, but just building it in a way that they can grow. And it's been quite good for your team. I know they've enjoyed the conversations with us as we work through building up the skills. I always ask two questions. I'm going to tweak one of them before we go back to another topic. We ask everybody on this episode, on this podcast, tell me about a skill set that's made you successful. So let me change that a little. Tell me about a skill set that would make somebody successful in cyber or IT. If you want to talk about your own and why you were successful, but what is that skill set that would make you successful in doing what you and us are training for now?
I think the skill set is humility, and the humility is asking questions and then listening to the answer.
Sorry, what was that? I didn't hear you there.
Oh, I would say it's humility.
No, I was kidding. Then I wasn't listening.
Or sorry, man, you got me on that one. I wasn't listening. That was good.
I thought you might do inquisitive. When I was thinking about how you might answer it, I thought you might, because it's the same kind of like always looking. Humility is the same way, right?
Mm-hmm. No, it's part of the humility is that inquisition kind of thing. And I'm not talking about, the inquisition of the the pre-medieval or what have you. It's that ability to ask questions. At one time, I once got a doctorate in a completely different field. And one of the persons who was a real imposing kind of professor, he said, the thing that makes you interesting, James, is you'll ask questions with absolutely no worry about looking silly or anything like that. There's at the level that we're at, most people really worry about looking dumb, and you don't worry about that, which means that to him, I probably looked dumb a lot, but it worked out. And I think it's that ability. And he once put that in a, that's what got me a job. In fact, my first job in tech, he said he asked questions without any worry of ego. I think he used that phrase.
That's an interesting way to look at it. Okay. So I've never talked to an evangelist before. What are you thinking? Future trends, future worries. What's the thing in the back of your brain that if you were doing a keynote for an hour and a half, you'd want to talk about?
I think the first thing is I don't think people look back on two major elements. And the first one is we're using technology more deeply in businesses than ever before. I've never heard really people talking about that fact. And then two, I don't think that we're getting our ducks in a row, our processes in a row as much as we should. So the trends that I'm seeing, for example, if we're using technology more deeply than ever before, that's why you see other trends. So it's root causes. I don't think we look at root causes enough. And so if you look at the root causes of using technology more deeply before, that's why we're talking more and more about governance, risk management, and compliance, or about privacy. Because if you're using tech more than ever before to keep a company alive, to keep its direction, to keep it on mission, or a government on mission, or a nonprofit on mission, then you've got to know how you're keeping that information private. And so regulations are going to continue to change things, and an interest in doing that, whether it be Canadian regulations, the 50 plus regulations that you find in the States, NIS2 and GDPR in the European Union. I was just talking to the UK folks in Parliament, and they're trying to figure out, do they diverge from NIS2 in Europe and GDPR in Europe, or adopt it? So that's a major trend that you're seeing.
There is a whole industry around regulatory bodies and regulation of IT, cyber, and as I mentioned, we used to be in the telecom world and did a lot of their government relations here, and a lot of conversations. And now I watch, and it's 10 years since I've left. I've been completely crazy what they're having to go through now and the process. And it's very hard for a legislature to lead an agenda on these issues because the politicians are 2, 3, 4 years behind, right?
That's right. That's right. And you have to educate them about what the importance of the tech is in the first place. And then they can start understanding, why insurance companies are requiring what they're requiring, for example.
And I wouldn't want to put you on the spot, but you're going through a lot of regulatory change in Washington that there is no view yet of what it's looking like or what it could be. You could just have regulations thrown out the window, right?
I suppose it's possible. I think what you might have happen on some level is realizing that some of these elements are reinventing the wheel. They have multiple kind of approaches. Why not streamline it? I suppose is one of the urges that you see, right? Whether that's going to have unintended consequences and whether that streamlining is actually steamrolling issues is another question, isn't it?
Well thought out, articulate legislation going through a parliament or going through your system in the United States always has unintended consequences too.
It does. And, one of the things that I've been really interested in personally, but also CompTIA is interested in, is what are those unintended consequences? Because you could have regulation that can cause a lot of money to be spent, and that will be taken away, let's say, from upskilling efforts. You know what I mean? So, or can it be legislation on some level that makes perfect sense theoretically, but is somehow causing an anti-competitive environment? And that's no good for anybody either.
No, it's going to be interesting to watch. We were watching very closely everything that goes on in Washington. There's a lot, and we can joke about your president, but there's also a lot of good that comes from the disruption he's doing, right? There's some opportunities there to make some changes. And I'm not sure he's entirely wrong. People will find that confusing for me to say, but I'm not sure he's entirely wrong in the way he's treating some things. The manner, the style wouldn't be mine, but I'm not the president.
The style and substance thing that can be problematic on both sides, right? But the idea of that we've had so much change. AI is a major part of that. Our need to use data more and to make data-driven decisions. And that means that the risk goes up as we capture people's data. So what are the regulations that need to happen so that we can get business done, and yet we don't do it in a way that takes people's rights away, but also doesn't make a corporation or a government do risky things or tolerate undue risk?
All the while keeping a really close eye on the enemies that we have that would love nothing more than to cause havoc. And which brings us back to exactly why we're working together, is to protect a small business, a medium business, a large business, protect government. That's a big key of everything we're all trying to do together. So I got to go back. I'll give you a last chance here, but I'm going to ask you one question. I warned you. I know you've listened to all 48 of our episodes. We ask everybody to talk to us a little bit about a mentor in their life and whether or not that individual knew that they were your mentor.
It's interesting you bring that up. The mentor, his name is Bob Essick. He's about 81 now, 82, lives down in Los Angeles. And I don't think he realized how much of a mentor he was in the tech world, because I got to know him as he was a professor in British Romantic literature at a university, right? And the reason why he became such a mentor is instead of talking about themes or whatever, which is fine in poetry or whatever, he was interested in how art is physically created. The technology that a certain author named William Blake, if you've ever heard of William Blake before, he's a poet. But see, Blake was more, if you take a look at him, he created the first you could argue the first web pages. And I'm being facetious, but if you look at all of his poetry was created using a printing technique. And so Bob taught me about the technology involved in the creation of art. And I just took off on the technology side. And the next thing I knew, I was working with him on the Blake Archive. And you can Google this, the Blake Archive. And they put that whole thing online. It was fascinating to watch them do that. And that got me into understanding, well, how are you making these images? How are you scanning them? So I got involved in a project creating books online using, back then it was XML. There was no HTML. And I was working on the internet and databases in 1992, which is that's a ways back, right? That's before Windows 95.
It's too bad. If you had gone the other way and decided to sell books, used books online, maybe you'd be Google. No, sorry, Amazon.
You know, I know kind of.
What an incredible story about entrepreneurship that he went selling used books online.
Yeah. It's amazing. It's an amazing story. So that's what got me into tech. And his was James, never be afraid to ask questions. And two, keep learning about, just get deeper and deeper into the technology. And that will allow you to understand the ripple effects of things. So if you want to talk about politics, if you look into the technology side of it, it can give you a perspective that I think on whatever topic, how businesses use tech or whatever. If you look at it on those lines, it gives me it keeps me grounded.
Maybe he'll get a chance to hear this and have a better understanding for the impact he had on you. We asked the question for a reason, because in our sector, we teach in smaller classrooms. We were talking to somebody earlier today, very well-known brand, averages 400 students a year. That's it. Very well-known brand, coast to coast. But that institute that he was running about 400 students a year at the peak, but chunking out graduates that went into healthcare, went into paralegal, went into important jobs. And we were having a conversation today about how to integrate some of your project programs into that. And they're looking at the full program too. So I think it's important that we actually talk about what mentoring means and how we can all have a moment and do it. Good and bad. I've mentored poorly. You know, I have issues with my anger on occasion. I have to manage that. And I've worked really hard to manage that over my lifetime, but there's good and bad. So before we wrap up, interesting conversation from the four pillars of technology to hockey to the Grateful Dead. We talked about today a little bit. I actually had a chance to see a Grateful Dead concert, but no experience quite like a Jimmy Buffett concert. That was an ecosystem unto itself.
Yeah, the parrot heads. Yeah, you had dead heads, then you had parrot heads, right? Yeah,
and an cool economic machine. I don't think he owned many things. He owned the percentages of a lot of things, except for his music and his concerts. And always interested to see those kinds of fun stories. So before we finish, anything you want to talk about? Any last thoughts for our listeners when you talk about tech or just life, or maybe you want to talk about Canada-US hockey games? I don't know. I'll leave it to you. We'll let you know when you guys win one of the important ones. It's been a while.
Yeah, it has been a while. You know, keep on learning, folks. Jerry Garcia, you say keep on trucking, right? But it's keep on learning, right? I think it's really important that as more things change more and more, I think one, get a foundation and keep on learning things, and don't be afraid to get hands-on about stuff and practical. I always tell students, if you hear about an acronym, try to find something in Linux or Windows or somewhere, right, to actually make it a practical application of it. You do that, I think you will retain relevance in the tech world much more powerfully than anybody who just reads about this stuff.
Great advice. You would swear James and I have spent years together knowing each other because we just like fast friends and we flow through conversations having fun. But I encourage you to go online and see some of the stuff he's done. There's some interesting speeches you can find, and we're looking forward to seeing him at some events together with us soon. But really interesting guy doing interesting stuff, and we appreciate you and the partnership with NAC, and look forward to seeing you again soon, James.
Well, I absolutely can't wait. And let's see if we can find something that the U.S. can win at.
I think you've got a lot of things you guys win at, but let's leave it there. The great thing, we joke around about the Canada-U.S. relationship right now, but it's way beyond politics. Best friends, best buddies, been through it all, right? And no political spat is going to ever get in the way of the relationship between our two great countries.
Fast friends always debate, don't they? So.
And we control more maple syrup than you, so we've always got that, and you kind of need some of our oil. As an aside, because we're riffing here, I encourage you, if you've never had a chance, Google the maple syrup theft. there's a great story about a heist of maple syrup in Canada that is very worthwhile reading or checking out because it's quite fun. But with that, thanks, James. We'll leave this for the 48th episode of the Ed Up Canada podcast, and I look forward to
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Ed Up Canada podcast. We release new episodes regularly, so make sure you hit that subscribe button so you know when they are officially out. If you love this episode, please leave a 4 or 5-star review wherever you listen to your podcasts so that others can also discover how a set of skills can lead to success. Thanks for learning with us.